Hello and welcome to Craft with Sarah. Today we're going to be doing a fun craft with our Cricut machine, which also requires lots of actual physical crafting as well, and that is button art. So you can see I've got this lovely little flamingo here. So I'm going to go through how to design the shape you want to cover in buttons in Design Space, and then we're going to cut it out and fill it in, and I'll show you some handy tips for getting all the little buttons in all the little spaces. So if I come in a bit closer, you can see just how pretty our little flamingo is looking. And as well as doing the flamingo, we're also going to go into designs that are a little bit more complicated, like this dinosaur, which if you'll notice, he's got the blue buttons and then he's also got orange spikes on him. So this is a two-coloured button art design as well. I'm going to show you how to do that in Design Space and also how to make it as well. Not only are we going to learn about doing the button art, but also how to make the matching frames to go on the inside of your shadow box. So let's get started. Before we jump into Design Space, we first need to measure our frame that we're going to put the button art in to make sure we design something the correct size, because there's nothing worse than cutting something out with your Cricut only to realise it's not going to fit. So take your frame and turn it upside down and take the backing off. Then if yours is a new frame, which mine unfortunately isn't, you'll probably have a bit of paper in here with some branding and things. But what we want to do is to take out this spacer that's in the box frame. I've got my spacer here. I want to take my ruler and I'm going to do it in inches. You want to measure from one edge of the frame all the way to the other. So mine is 8.5 inches. So we're going from the very far left to the very far right, and that's because what we're measuring here is our piece of card, which is going to sit on top of this when we put it in the box frame. So once you've got your measurement, then open up Design Space and we can get cracking on creating our button art design. Open up Design Space on your computer and click the New Project box. This will create a blank canvas for us to create our artwork. The first thing we're going to make is the frame and the backing mat of card that we'll put our design onto. So go into Shapes and choose Square. We need to make this square the size of the measurement of our frame we just took. So at the top of the page you've got this size, width and height. Make sure the padlock icon is closed. If it's open like this, just click it so that the top of the padlock is closed. And that means that when we put our measurement into the first box, so the width, and then hit enter, the height will change automatically as well. So this is the main size of our frame, and we need to cut out a smaller square inside of it. So I'm going to choose another square shape here, and to make things easier, I'm going to change the colour of this one. So to do that, click the coloured box next to where it says line type, and choose a different colour. So this one is going to sit inside, and that's where it will cut out my coloured frame on the outside. So my frame is 8.5 inches wide, so I'm going to make this 7. We need to make sure that this is exactly in the middle of our outer square, otherwise our border is going to be all wonky. But luckily, there's an easy Cricut tip for lining them up exactly. So in your layers panel, click one of the squares and then press Ctrl on your keyboard and click the other one to select them both. In the top menu, you've got something which says Align. Click in there and then press Center. What that's done is it's put our purple square exactly in the middle of the grey square, which is exactly what we want it to do. Okay, so if we were to send this to our Cricut now, it's just going to cut one square and a smaller square. We need to make our border so that all it cuts is the outer shape without the bit in the middle. And to do that, we'll use the Slice tool. Click on one of the layers in the Layers panel and then press Ctrl again to select the other one. Go down to the bottom of the Layers panel and click the Slice button. Now if I hide some of these layers, you can see what it's done. It's cut that purple box out of the grey one to create our border. So it's left behind this middle grey bit. We don't need that, so I'm going to right click on it and press delete. And then click the eye again, and my purple is now showing. So I've got two separate bits here. This is going to be the white, which I'll cut my design on. So I'll just change the colour to white to make it a bit more obvious. And then the grey is going to be my border. So I'm going to align these again because I moved them about, so they're not completely in the centre. So that's nearly ready for us to add our image into the middle, but before we do that, we're going to make one more square. And the reason for this will become obvious when we start making our button in a moment. So I'm going to click and drag this square to make it bigger. And I'm going to make it bigger than the white square, but not as big as the orange square. And what this new square is going to be is it's going to be what I'm going to stick the other bits of card to in order to create the base for the frame. So I need to just move that out of the way so that it will cut when we cut the design, but for now we don't need it to be part of our box frame. Okay, so now we are ready to add the picture to our frame. So I'm going to go to Images, and this will load up all of the Cricut Access images here. You can filter them by free by clicking filter and then free. So if you don't have access, if you don't pay the monthly subscription, you can still choose from all of these free images. If you do have access, then you don't need to tick the free box. So there are two different types of images that I'm going to show you how to use. The first is a simple silhouette shape. So I typed flamingo into the search. I'm going to use this flamingo and click insert images. So you can see in the layers panel, this is just one layer, the flamingo, that's all it is. So I can move it, resize it to make it bigger. And then I want this to be exactly in the middle of the white square. So just like I did before, click the flamingo layer in the layers panel and then hold Ctrl down on your keyboard and click the white square and then go to Align and Center. So the easiest way to assemble your button up is to cut the shape out of your white square so that when you then cut the coloured shape out, you can just stick it in the hole that it makes, and that will mean that you don't have any bumps of paper being lined on top of other bits of paper, so your buttons will sit flush against the page. And again, that will become clear once we start making our button up. So I need to use my slice tool again to cut this flamingo shape out of the white. So I'm going to click the flamingo, or you can click it in the layers panel, and I'm on the white square, and go down to the bottom of the layers and click slice. So if I hide the pink flamingo, you can see you've now got a white flamingo. I don't need that one, so I'm just going to right click on the layer and delete. And now my white square has this flamingo cut out of it. And I'm just going to turn that layer back on by clicking the eye. And then if it was the flamingo that I was cutting, this would now be ready to cut. So I'd just go and click Make It and follow the instructions to cut out all of the shapes on my Cricut. However, I am going to show you how to use multi-layered images as well. That takes a little bit more work in Design Space from the upfront, which is why I wanted to show you the easy one first, which was just the one layered flamingo. But now we're going to do a dinosaur instead, which has more than one layer, so that we can cut more than one colour, because our final wall art is going to have more than one colour of button. Alright, I'm going to use the undo key and just undo all of the flamingo steps. There we go. And now I'm going to click Images again. And this time I'm going to search for dinosaur. I'm using this dinosaur here with the smiley face, And if you want to use the same one, the number is M38453. So click Insert Images and our little happy dinosaur will appear. You'll notice by looking at the layers that this one's different than the flamingo. The flamingo only had one colour, so it was only one shape. But this dinosaur has green, yellow, orange, brown and black, so it's got different layers here. We don't need to cut all of them, but before we start playing about with the layers, it's easiest because they're all grouped together. I can move them all at the same time just to resize the dinosaur to how big you want it to appear. And now we've got the dinosaur selected. Press Ctrl and click your white square and align it in the center. Okay, so now our little happy dinosaur is all ready for us to start manipulating the layers. If I just go through and hide these one by one, you can see how the dinosaur is made up of all the different colours. If you just wanted to cut it with one colour, all you'd need is this brown layer because that's the outline of the whole dinosaur. Before I start playing about with the layers though, I'm going to follow the same steps we did with the flamingo to cut the whole dinosaur out of my white square. So choose the layer with the brown dinosaur and then Ctrl and click on the white square and press Slice. So this is done exactly like what it did before. I'm just going to hide that one and that one and that one. Okay, so now you can see we've got our white square with the dinosaur cut out. So I don't need the other white dinosaur, I can get rid of that. And I don't need the brown dinosaur anymore. So I'm going to right click and delete that. What I want to do now is to create my different dinosaur shapes. So I want to make the green part of the dinosaur and then the orange spikes as separate images. This green one has these circles cut out, so I don't want that one. So I'm just going to hide that. And now we're getting closer. I don't need the black dinosaur at the bottom either, so I'm going to hide that one. And now I'm left with two, the yellow dinosaur without spikes and the orange one with spikes. I don't want to cut out the eyes and the mouth because when you're doing button art you need the shapes to be as simple as possible, and those are really tiny holes and you're not going to be able to get your buttons to go around them, so we need to get rid of those cuts. I've got the yellow dinosaur selected here and then go down to Contour at the bottom of the Layers panel. Click on each of the eyes and the mouth and then close that window and you can see they've now disappeared. If you click the eye next to the yellow dinosaur, you can see that we need to do the same for the orange one. So I've got the orange dinosaur layer selected, click Contour and then get rid of those shapes and press X. Alright, so we're nearly ready to cut, we just need to change one more thing. So at the moment this is going to cut the whole orange dinosaur and the whole yellow dinosaur. We don't want that. What we want is the whole yellow dinosaur and then just the spikes so that we can take those two shapes and fit them inside this cutout on the white square. So to do this, oops, I've just put all those back. I'm just going to delete the green layer and the black layer to stop that happening again. Okay, we need to use our slice tool again. So select the yellow dinosaur and then Control and click on the orange one and then press Slice. And what this has done now, if I hide these you can see as I go along, is I've got one of just the spikes and then I've got the yellow dinosaur and the orange one. I don't need the orange dinosaur layer, so I can right click on that one and delete. And now I filled in that hole in the white perfectly without any parts of that dinosaur being duplicated. I'm just going to do one more thing, which you don't have to do, and that's to change the colour of the dinosaur to blue. It doesn't actually matter what colour you've got things here because when you cut it, you're cutting it on cards, so you can just feed in what other colour you want. But I like to test out my colour combinations in Design Space before I cut them to make sure I'm happy. I want to cut out this orange frame and the spikes on the dinosaur from the same bit of card. So they need to be the same shade of orange, and they're not at the moment. The spikes are a bit darker. If you've got that problem as well with some of your layers and you want to make them the same colour so that they'll cut from the same bit of card, go to Colour Sync in the top right, and then you can drag and drop to make things the same colour. So now my square and my spikes on the dinosaur are the same shade of orange. So now I can click Make It, and it's going to arrange everything for me. I'm going to change some of the paper sizes just to make it a little bit easier for me. That one, will that fit on A4? Just. Yeah, that's fine. This frame is bigger than A4, so I'll have to do it on 12 by 12. And you can see I've got my spikes, which are on the same mat because we made them the same shade of orange. If we hadn't have done that, then the spikes would have been appearing on a mat all by itself. And then finally we have our blue dinosaur, and I'll cut him out of A4 as well. When you're happy with the sizes of paper you've chosen and you've moved things about as you want to cut them, click Continue. Make sure that your Cricut machine is turned on so that it can connect. And then when it's all loaded, choose your material. I'm using 160 GSM card, so I'm going to choose medium cardstock. Make sure you've got the correct blade loaded, and then follow the instructions on the screen to cut out all of the shapes on all of the different mats. As you're cutting the different parts of the card, it's important that you take it off the mat in the correct way so that you don't bend or warp your cutouts, because if you do, then it'll be really difficult to get it looking nice and sitting flat in your box frame. To start with, I'm going to pull my paper away. This is just the edging of the card, so I'm not actually using this, so it doesn't matter if it warps. So you can see what I mean, it's kind of folded up in the corners. And if we were to do that on our actual part of the design we're keeping, it's not going to look very professional when we're done. So for this one, instead of peeling the card off of the mat, I'm going to peel the mat off of the card. To do that, turn it upside down and then slowly start bending your mat back. You don't want to fold it because you might end up cracking or snapping your mat. So it's just a gentle bend, and as you do that, you'll find your design just comes right off. You might need to give it a little helping hand, but just make sure that it's the mat you're moving and not your card. And then you can just push out your design when it's done. Okay, there we go. So this is perfectly flat against my craft mat, which is perfect for what I want. I've already cut out everything else, so I'm ready to start assembling my squares and everything together before I add the buttons. So the first thing you want to take is the white square that we did that's slightly smaller than your main mat. So this is my main mat, and how it's going to work when it's all put together is it'll perfectly line up and be like this. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to stick my cutout sheet on top of the larger white square. And you want to try and get it in the middle. Sorry, it's kind of white on white. It's a bit hard to see. If I tilt it, it's not really helping. I'm going to stick it so it's roughly in the middle, but you don't need to worry about getting it exact because you're not actually going to see this white square. So turn over your cutout, get some glue, or you can use double-sided tape, but I like to use glue because it means you get a little bit of wiggle room when you stick it on to move it if it's not quite in the right place. So you don't want to completely drown it in glue because again we don't want to risk warping the card, but you need enough on there that it's going to have a good stick. So I'm going to turn that around, get my white square and just stick this on it. So it doesn't have to be directly in the middle, but as central as you can get it. And again, if it's not square, it doesn't matter because you're not going to see any of the outer edge when we're done. Okay, so the next thing to do is to stick on our frame, and this is going to line up perfectly around the edge of our top cutout square. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to put glue on my second square, so the bigger one. Just put the glue on the bigger square. Do not put any on your actual cutout sheet. So I'm just going to run along each edge with a little bit of glue. And make sure you don't go too close to your cutout square because you don't want to smush any of this glue out from the edges when you put your mat over. Okay, so I've got my mat and I'm going to line it up against the cutout square, and it will fit perfectly because we sliced those squares out of each other in Design Space. They are exact matches on every side, so that when we stick it, we now have a perfect mat and inner bit ready for us to start adding our little dinosaur. Okay, so we're going to kind of do the same thing again. We're going to fit the different colours inside of here, and they'll pop right in to that cutout square so that they're flush against it. Now, if you're going to do any glitter on your button art, so the flamingo I showed you at the start, its beak was done in glitter because it was quite thin and little and I didn't have any buttons or anything that would be small enough to go on there, so I used glitter for that. If you're going to put glitter on any of it, do it now before you stick it in. It'll be so much easier than trying to do glitter and not get it on anything that it's not supposed to go. But for this one, I'm not going to use any glitter at all, so I'm just going to take this out again. And I'm going to do the dinosaur bit first. So turn it upside down, add some glue. My glue is being a little bit stubborn and not wanting to come out. Okay. Right, let's turn him back around. Just gonna stick him in there. And again, it will line up perfectly because we sliced the shapes out of each other. So there's no overlap, there's no bits that won't fit. It just perfectly goes in there and sits flush against everything else. That looks really cool. Alright, so for the spikes, I'm actually going to add the glue straight in here in the hole. I think that'll be easier because it's quite a small piece. So make sure I've got it the right way round and just put that in. And look how nicely that goes in, just like a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, so you want to wait a little bit for that to dry, just so you're not accidentally going to move it about when we add our buttons. But our design is now completely ready for us to start adding all those buttons, sequins and other fancy things to get our button art looking amazing. I've got a selection of different things that I'm going to use to add the buttons to the dinosaur. I've obviously got buttons, and mine are all blue to match the blue cutout that I've done. I've got some other buttons as well in slightly different shades. Some of these are shaped, so I've got some flower shapes in there and some squares in that one. I've got some sticky gemstones in various different sizes and shapes of blue, and these are really handy, especially the little ones, for all those little tiny nooks and crannies we're going to get. I'm not sure if I'm going to use them, but I found some blue sequins, so you never know, they might come in handy. And finally, my ultimate trick for button art is seed beads, and I've got two different shades of blue here. So these are tiny little plastic beads, which we're going to use right at the end to fill in any little gaps that we might have between the buttons. Okay, so you can use whatever embellishments that you've got. Try and keep them all kind of vaguely the same colour for if you're doing the same colour thing. And you can experiment with different sizes and shapes, and some bits are kind of sparkly and some aren't. Whatever you've got lying about will be great, but obviously a good selection of buttons in different sizes is the most important thing. So I'm going to move all these to the side. Bring Mr. Dinosaur back. For this dinosaur, I'm not going to put any buttons on the spikes of the dinosaur because they're really small, and you can see if I just get one of my smaller buttons, even that is going to look really silly on the spikes. So because I've done it the same nice orange starry colour as the border, I'm going to keep that as a nice match between the two. So the buttons are only going on the dinosaur. So I find the easiest way to start a button up is to get some bigger buttons and work out your placement of them, and then we'll add the smaller ones around them as we get going. So I'm just putting a few bigger buttons in. Let's get some more out of the bag. And the reason we're doing the bigger ones first is it helps us to fill in the gaps a little bit quicker by adding big ones first rather than hundreds and hundreds of smaller ones. But also it's easier to plan the spacing of the bigger ones straight away, because once you start adding lots, if you all do it all, you can end up without any space for the big buttons. And it will just be full up of little ones, which will still look equally pretty, but will take you a really long time to make. Alright, so you don't want too many massive ones on there. And just vaguely put them on. So I think I'm happy with that, and I'll probably use that one in there to join up. So you can see I've got different sizes and shapes and colours all going on in there. But I'm not going to stick these down yet. I'm just going to leave them there. Try and avoid touching them as you go, and then I'm going to move on to the head. So I'm going to get some of my other shape buttons and just place them around, so I'm getting a feel for the placement without sticking anything down just yet in case I need to move it. So some of these are going kind of outside, a little bit outside of the dinosaur. That is absolutely fine. It's not going to make a difference. Try not to go too outside, so something like that, because that will ruin the outline. But a teeny weeny little bit is absolutely fine. And you'll see we've got some gaps. That doesn't matter. We're going to fill that in on our second pass of buttons. So once you've got a little part of your design done and you're happy, then I'd recommend you start sticking. Because otherwise if you do the whole thing and then you sneeze or you move the table or the dog jumps up or something like that, they'll go everywhere and you'll have to start again. So I'm just going to stick these ones down in the head of the dinosaur. So just turn your buttons over one by one, put some glue on, and then stick them down. So one of the best bits about using glue for this is you can move them about, and I just put glue everywhere, which wasn't very clever. But again, it dries clear, so if you do make any little errors, it's not going to be the end of the world. So again, don't worry about the gaps we've got coming up. We will be fixing that later. Just going to move some of them a little bit, squidge in. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go down the neck, and that's going to need quite small buttons. It's a small area. So again, I'm just going to fill it all in with buttons and stick them down. I'm trying to use all different shapes and styles and colours because I think that adds a nice little bit of variation when you're going. So just work through your whole design, doing a little bit by little bit, and when you get to your big buttons, then you can fill in the gaps around them. And again, so when I've kind of done this part, I'll start sticking, and then when I've done up to the legs, I'll stick those, and finally the tail. So I'm not going to make you watch me stick all these buttons down because it's probably going to take me about half an hour and you'd be really bored. So I'm just going to hit pause, get all my buttons stuck, and then come back and show you how to fill in all the little gaps. And here he is, Mr. Dinosaur, with his first layer of buttons done. Doesn't this look cool already? Got all these buttons lining up in all the different sizes and shapes and colours of blue, and he is looking good. So one of the great things is that even if you left it like this, because we used coloured card for the shape of the dinosaur, in all the gaps of buttons, so for example here and here, it's still showing through the correct colour blue. So you absolutely could leave it like this, put it on your wall, and it's going to look awesome. But we can make it better, and that is by using a second layer of buttons to fill in some of those gaps. Okay, so you'll notice, even though I had all of the different beads and sequins and everything at the start, I've only used buttons so far for my bottom layer. That is completely up to you, whatever your preference is. You can use your sticky gems and things on the bottom layer. I did on the unicorn. And then for the flamingo, for the legs, which were too thin for buttons, I actually just used sequins. So there's a whole range of different things you can do. But for this second layer, what we're going to try and achieve is filling in some of the gaps of card you can still see. And we're going to do that in a couple of ways. One is by adding a second layer of buttons. So there's a gap here between the buttons, and I'm just going to stick another one over the top. So it's going to stick itself to the other buttons around it and cover up that hole where we're seeing the card. If you're going to add googly eyes to your design like I did on the flamingo, then now is your chance to do that. I did try and see if they would suit Mr. Dinosaur, but he just looked a little bit ridiculous, so I'm not going to add googly eyes to him. So I'm just adding some extra buttons and sticking them on top of other buttons to fill in some of these holes. You might need a little bit of extra glue than you used before, just to make sure these stick, because all the buttons are different heights and things, so it can be a little bit tricky. I think this is going to work especially well on the neck because there's quite a few spaces on there. Just because it was so thin, I couldn't really fit the buttons in. So at this point, I'm going to bring in some of my sticky gems because these are a lot smaller than my buttons, so I think it'll look nice. And the best thing about these is obviously they're already sticky, so don't need to add glue. But of course you could if they're not quite sticky enough. Oh, just knocked him off. I'm going to fill in a few more gaps with these gemstones. Add some big ones and some smaller ones as well. And you might find that the smaller ones actually fit in on the original shape without having to be a second layer. So there's a nice hole here, which a gemstone will fit in perfectly. There we go. So take your time to just identify all the little spaces and fill them in with something smaller, or cover them up with a second layer of buttons. So here I might just add a gemstone as a bit of a second layer to cover that tiny hole. Alright, so I'm probably going to keep playing with this for about another 10 minutes. So I will just pause the video and carry on with that. But before I do, I want to introduce you to the wonders of seed beads. These are so small. Tiny little things. You can see a few there. And these are really good for any tiny gaps you've got that you want to add something to. Just put a bit of glue in the gap. And of course your glue will dry see-through. So if there's a bit of extra glue, it doesn't matter. And then just drop some seed beads into the gap and push them in with the edge of your finger. Or you can use a weeding tool. Just if you get any glue on it, make sure you wipe it off. And I love the effect of adding seed beads to button art to fill in the little gaps because it gives a new layer of texture. And it means you're seeing less of that original card colour through, which gives an overall more finished and polished appearance. Ta-da! Here is my finished dinosaur. I'm so pleased with how it's turned out. He's really sparkly and 3D, and I think he looks awesome. So I'm really happy with that. So the only thing left to do now is to put him in the frame. If I move him over to one side, I'm just going to grab my frame. Here we go. So, if you're framing it for real, then you really should clean the glass inside and out before you go any further. I use Windoline or Windex with a microfiber cloth and just rub it all really carefully down. Get rid of any smudges on the glass and any dust, especially with these wooden box frames. They do tend to generate dust on the inside of the frame, which you don't want to show through. So when you've cleaned the glass, it should just pop out of the frame. Put it back in. Try to touch it as little as possible because you don't want to put any more fingerprints on it. Alright, so once the glass is in, then you want to add your spacer back in. So that just sits on the edges. Now if you want to add any embellishments in your frame, now's the time to do it. So I've got some scatter crystals, and you normally use these at weddings and things to go on the tables to add a bit of glitter, but they also work really well in box frames. So you could put whatever you want in here. You could add buttons, sequins. On my flamingo one, you'll notice I used feathers. The unicorn one has smaller gold gemstones in it as well. You could add glitter, but that tends to just stick to the frame and look a bit rubbish, so I wouldn't add glitter personally unless it's quite thick. But whatever you want to put in here, make sure you put it in at this stage, and then take your lovely button art. Make sure all the glue is dry because we don't want any bits falling off. Mine is still a little bit wet just for the demo of the video. Hopefully it'll be okay. So turn it upside down and then place it on top of that spacer, and it'll perfectly line up because we measured it at the start of the video. And then finally put in the back of your frame, and then we're going to close all the little tabs. Here is our finished dinosaur. Isn't he cute? I'm just going to move him a little bit closer so you can see. Hopefully that's picking up all the buttons and gemstones and beads and everything we've put on there to fill in that blue outline to create this gorgeously intricate dinosaur button art design. So you can do this with any shape you want in Design Space, as we went through at the beginning, and it's a really fun craft to do both by yourself or maybe with your kids or grandkids. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please give it a thumbs up underneath, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more tutorials just like this one. Thank you for watching. Bye!